So hello and welcome back. If you've seen some of my previous videos, and if you haven't, this is the first one, then welcome. I'm glad to have you here. So I'm Maria McMahon, and so far in this series of red flags that are based on my book, The Top 50 Red Flags of Romantic Predators, I've covered the flags in the early stages of the relationship, you know, the courting, dating stage. Then I moved on into getting deeper into the relationship and then looked at the red flags in the devaluing stage. Now, those stages are a natural progression in most narcissistic relationships, particularly, obviously, romantic relationships. And they all end up with the next and the final 10 in the top 50 red flags of romantic predators. So if you're in the relationship, you're going to be ultimately suffering big time. And the whole reason that I wrote the book in the first place, and I'm doing this series of videos just to introduce you to more of the concepts in the book, was basically so that my clients and, you know, groups, members from my Facebook groups, and just other people out there could have an easy reference book that shows you what to look for. Because narcissistic behavior, particularly when they are courting you, you know, romantically trying to trap you, it's all very, very typical. So when you know what to look for, you can really arm yourself with the knowledge that you need to protect yourself from ever getting involved with a narcissist again. And believe me, if you don't, the next 10 flags are going to be, or become, your reality. And I honestly wouldn't wish any of them on my worst enemy. Now, the next 10 flags that I'm going to cover from here, it's 41 to 50, really are the big bad wolves of narcissistic abuse. And it doesn't take years for your life and your psyche to be completely ruined by a romantic predator. It can happen, you know, in as little as a few months or even a few weeks, and your entire reality will have changed, and you'll be in a mind fog about what the hell has happened to you. You'll have been love bombed, devalued, discarded. Everything that you once held to be true will have been shattered into pieces. Your confidence will have gone, your self-worth will be in tatters, and your mental and physical health could well be a major concern for you. Now, if you're experiencing any of these big flags, by now, avoidance is obviously irrelevant because it's already too late to avoid them, because you're now deep in narc land and narc abuse land and the fallout of it, and the abuse will be already deeply entrenched. So what I'll do on these next 10 videos that I'm going to do, I'll talk about what you can do, and I'll try to offer some advice where I feel it will be helpful. You know, just give you some tips on what you might be able to do. So the subject today is red flag number 41, and that's cognitive dissonance. Now, cognitive dissonance came from the American social psychologist called Festinger. And the theory is that we have this inner drive to hold all our attitudes and behavior in harmony to avoid disharmony or dissonance. So when something gets in the way of that, we get cognitive inconsistency. So what this means in reality is when two conflicting things happen, your brain struggles to make sense of those two opposing things. Now, this actually happened to me once, many, many years ago, when an aunt that I really thought the world of accused me of stealing £400 out of her handbag. And I remember being so stunned. I honestly felt as if someone had died. The feeling of disbelief and shock that I had was just so intense. I just could not reconcile this aunt who I'd always loved and defended when other people, you know, made fun of her because she was a bit dippy at times. And I'd always believed that her one good trait that she always had that was always right was her good judge of character. So why this aunt would possibly think that I'd go into her purse or her wallet, if you're American, you know, in the middle of the night and steal £400. It was just beyond my comprehension. And I didn't realize at the time that this was cognitive dissonance. It was so bad, I actually didn't speak to her for over 10 years. And when I finally did speak to her, it was the day of my mother's funeral. And I only spoke to her because my mum had been trying to get me to talk to her for years, because she didn't like that there was this disharmony between us, even though she wasn't, her and her sister didn't get on that brilliantly, you know, all through their life, but she just didn't like this disharmony. And it was my mum's voice echoing in my mind saying, oh, I wish you'd talk to her, that made me crack on the day of the funeral, because obviously that was a very, very vulnerable day for me. And I did it for my mother, not for myself. Now, what happens in a narcissistic relationship is your partner is behaving one way in the beginning and it's all wonderful. And then suddenly their behavior changes and they become very cruel and hurtful. And you just don't understand what's going on. So there are two things going on in your mind. They just don't make sense. Two conflicting realities that you've experienced with the same person. And there's usually no reason why, no reason that makes any sense to you. And there's this complete inability to reconcile the two totally conflicting things in a way that makes sense to you. So when your worlds collide in this way and your brain is scrambling to make sense of it, this is cognitive dissonance. Now, gaslighting, which is a subject all on its own, and I do have another video about gaslighting, is one of the main tactics leading to cognitive dissonance, because it makes you question your reality and start doubting yourself. So the narcissist keeps saying things to make you doubt yourself, like, well, that's not what I said, or you've misunderstood me, or you've misinterpreted what I've said, or, you know, you must be losing your mind because that isn't what I said. You know, why are you saying that? And they will outright lie to make you doubt your reality. And it's also very, very subtle. And, you know, the narcissist is very, very good at twisting and bending your reality. So you really do start questioning yourself. Now, over time, you can really lose your grasp on reality. So you become more and more dependent on your partner for validation. And of course, this means you become more codependent. If you typically are a codependent person, which generally happens because of, you know, how you were brought up, you definitely become even more so. What also happens is that you tend to downplay all the bad times with the narcissist and recall the good, because obviously this makes you feel better, but it also lays the groundwork for more abuse to continue. And this is how the cycle of abuse works. Your abuser sees that he or she has gotten away with some bad behavior because you're still there. You've forgiven them. So they have basically free rein. They have a green light to just go ahead and do it again. Now, unfortunately, the standard recommendations for dealing with cognitive dissonance are not very effective when you're going through the emotional turmoil of narcissistic relationships. Because what happens is cognitive dissonance creates a feeling in you. And by the time it happens, you're already in that feeling, reeling from the shock. And there's nothing you can do to turn back the clock and change it. And it's also very difficult to predict it. And therefore, it's kind of almost impossible to avoid it. So what you can do is look back at it and understand what it was and why it happened. And understand that it was not your fault. You didn't cause it to happen. And there was nothing you could have done to prevent it or done differently to make it less painful. Now, it's one of the many painful prices you will have had to pay if you've been in a narcissistic relationship or you're still in one. On the upside, once you realize it's happened the first time, it's not going to be quite as galling or shocking when it happens again, because the narcissist pattern will usually become clear to you. They'll bounce around between devaluing, love bombing, devaluing, discarding, and hoovering as they continue to play havoc with your emotions. So one of the most critical things that you can do is ground yourself in reality. And grounding yourself requires that you tune into yourself and consider, if you are, feeling confused or upset or uncomfortable in any way, ask yourself, why is that? What's going on? Because coming back to red flag number 1 is always trust your intuition, because your deep inner wisdom knows something is wrong. So tune into your mind and body and figure out what's causing the confusion. Now, I've talked in previous videos about your feelings being your emotional barometer. So trust them. What are they telling you? Your body also registers emotions and turns them into physical pain. And I talk about that in red flag number 44. And I think that's the one all about health. So it's vital to learn to listen to yourself, listen to your body, and trust your intuition. Now, when you feel that, write down what's happened and connect it with the reality of what's really going on emotionally and physically for you. If possible, it's also good if you can call a trusted family member or a friend and talk to, him or her about what's going on for you. Because talking about it can help you to get clarity that you maybe don't currently possess, because you're so embroiled in what's going on, you can't see the forest for the trees very often in these relationships, but a friend can, or a family member, they can see it, an outsider looking in. So these actions will help you to validate what happened and know that you're not losing the plot, you're not losing your mind, you're not crazy. The narcissist just wants you to think you are. So if you do these things, you're going to be far less likely to fall deeply down into the cognitive dissonance rabbit hole. But I always advise people, learn as much as you can about NPD, reach out and get support, join a group if you have to. I have 3 different Facebook support groups that are all quite busy and active. You get a lot of support in these groups, so reach out and get support if you're really struggling right now. Get a therapist if you really, really are struggling. And above all, most important is, if you are still in this relationship, find a way out, no matter how you do it, how long it takes, make a vow that you're going to get out, because it will never, ever change. And all it will do is continue to rob you of your happiness, your health. It can rob you of your financial stability and a whole bunch of other stuff. So you really don't want to be there. So stick with me, because red flag number 42 is going to be up next. And I'm going to be talking about toxic guilt and shame, which many people I know who struggle with narcissistic abuse also have a real problem with, because you internalize a lot of self-blame and guilt grows out of that. So tune into the next video, because I'm going to talk a little bit about that and hopefully give you some release from some of that toxic guilt and shame that you might be feeling. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again soon. Bye for now.